Innovation will now come to order. I apologize for my delay. I learned at the Citadel, if you're on time, you're late, and I was very late today, so I apologize, Mr. Connolly. But welcome, everyone, and thanks for your patience today. Without objection, the chair may declare a recess at any time, and I recognize myself for the purpose of making an opening statement. Good afternoon and welcome to this hearing of the Subcommittee on Cybersecurity, Information Technology, and Government Innovation. We're here today to get answers and accountability concerning the most recent IT acquisition failure at the Defense Department. It's not a major weapons system contract we're talking about. This is a garden variety travel booking system upgrade. And that's exactly what makes this failure so disturbing. As DoD acquisition expert Bill Greenwald of the American Enterprise Institute recently wrote, the department's, and I quote, the department's inability to bring online something as mundane as a workable tool for business travel doesn't bode well for its other efforts at accessing commercial technology and providers for military solutions. In artificial intelligence, data analytics, and a host of other areas, DoD is light years behind the commercial market. How can anyone expect the companies that make these technologies to do business with the Pentagon when it can't even adopt a relatively simple piece of software? After years of planning, DoD was up until a few months ago on course to finally replace its decades-old legacy travel system with a modern software-as-a-service solution reflecting commercial best practices. DoD's travel-related expenses, which chiefly fund temporary duty travel for civilian and military personnel, amounted last year alone to $8 billion. But hundreds of millions of those dollars were wasted on improper payments. Additional dollars were wasted implementing manual workarounds the system requires. These are funds diverted every year from the agency's warfighting mission. The annual cash bleed and user frustration under the existing system is so bad that DoD used it to justify the issuance of a 2021 of a non-competitive sole source contract for a replacement system. It was that important to exit their travel system as soon as possible. Last October, DoD Undersecretary for Personnel and Readiness, Gil Cisneros, instructed all DoD components that they were to move to the new travel system. And that course was affirmed when the agency's budget proposal was issued this past March. But just 2 months later, that all changed. In May, Undersecretary Cisneros issued a new memo that pulled the plug on the whole project and told all components to stick with or return to the old system. Since then, in media comments and briefings with committee staff, DoD has offered a variety of excuses for scrapping the effort to replace its archaic travel system. To put it politely, the excuses are lame, and they don't add up. That's why I invited Undersecretary Cisneros to personally come here today and tell us what went wrong. Mr. Cisneros is not here, however. So why is that? DoD never indicated Mr. Cisneros is unavailable. Instead, the agency officials decided to put forward one of Mr. Cisneros' subordinates, who they deemed better able to answer our questions. It's not clear how they arrived at that decision. 2 weeks ago, there was a joint subcommittee hearing held in this very room concerning DoD's failed financial audit. One of the witnesses was John Tenaglia, who was the senior procurement executive at DoD, who approved the sole sourcing of the new travel system contract. I asked Mr. Tenaglia, who was responsible for the recent cancellation of that contract, and he said, you can check the tape on this, he said that's under the purview of the Undersecretary of Personnel and Readiness. That's Mr. Cisneros, who's not here today. So that's who we invited to testify. That's who did not show up. So they sent his subordinate. That sounds to me like an attempt to dodge accountability, and the American people, it's not what they ask us to do up here. Even when we make mistakes, we need the people who are responsible to come up here to answer our questions so we can avoid such mistakes in the future. But that's not what's going to happen today. So, Mr. Register, for your sake, I don't want to hear you say today that you can't answer our questions because they're above your pay grade. I'm going to lose it if that happens. So with that, I'm going to yield to the ranking member of the subcommittee, Mr. Connolly. You're on deck.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and I join you in believing Mr. Cisneros should be here. The executive branch has a responsibility to be accountable to the legislative branch. If this is his aegis, if this is his lane in terms of managerial responsibility, he needs to be here and accountable to the American people here at the People's House in Congress. I want to begin by applauding President Biden's historic nomination, since we're talking about DOD, of Admiral Lisa Franchetti to serve as the Chief of Naval Operations, the highest-ranking officer of the United States Navy. Admiral Franchetti has a tremendous amount of experience at sea and ashore, including numerous high-level policy and administrative positions. If confirmed, Admiral Franchetti would be the first woman to be a Pentagon service chief and the first female member of the Chiefs of Staff. Unfortunately, Republican Senator Tommy Tuberville has created a national security vulnerability by actively obstructing all pending promotions for generals and admirals in the U.S. Armed Forces to limit women service members' access to reproductive health. The Senator's blockade is affecting more than 250 leaders waiting for promotion and their families, including those of Admiral Franchetti. The Pentagon rightly implemented new policies to effectively acknowledge the reality of the military's evolving makeup. But Senate Republicans have shamelessly hijacked that nomination process and threatened our country's national security to forward their agenda. According to the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, and I quote, "This indefinite hold harms America's national security and hinders the Pentagon normal operation. The United States military relies on the deep experience and strategic expertise of our senior military leaders. The longer that this hold persists, the greater the risk the U.S. military runs in every theater, every domain, and every service." Furthermore, 2 weeks ago, Republicans here voted almost unanimously to pass an amendment in the NDAA that unequivocally limits service members' access to abortion services. It is particularly disingenuous for Republicans to demand that military leadership fix the recruitment problem while simultaneously trying to force the Pentagon to enforce draconian policies that compromise women's reproductive autonomy, deny medical care for transgender troops, and eliminate diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives specifically created to improve that recruitment. To quote the former senior advisor of the Secretary of Defense, Bishop Garrison, "When the military gets recruits from diverse backgrounds, there will be more innovative thought, more innovative solutions to incredibly complex and complicated problems that are facing the national security apparatus today." And a lack of innovative thought is exactly why DOD has failed to replace its antiquated and much maligned travel management system, related also, I might add, to its IT platforms. In 2017, the Department began the effort to replace its legacy travel system, which has been plagued by high levels of improper payments. Eventually, DOD selected Concur Technologies to develop a prototype of a new travel management system. Based on the information available to us, it appears that the initial prototype and trial phase of DOD's new travel system showed promise. In fact, in 2021, after the prototype was, quote, deemed successful, unquote, DOD awarded Concur a 7-year sole source contract to implement a commercial software as a service program known as MyTravel. Last fall, the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness issued a memorandum mandating the use of the new system. But at the last minute, DOD pulled back. A few weeks ago, DOD rescinded the memo mandating the use of MyTravel and canceled the sole source contract for the build-out of the system. In short, DOD hired a contractor who delivered a functional product. But because the individual military services failed to uphold the commitments they previously had made to alter their financial management infrastructure, which is, as the chair indicated in our last hearing, a mess, with over 400 individual financial management systems in the Pentagon. What could go wrong with that? The new tool thus remained incompatible with their multiplicity system. It's unbelievable that DOD continues to use the financial management infrastructure that was criticized, as I said in our last hearing, which contains more than 400 unique financial systems operating across 10,000 disaggregated data management systems and 4,700 data warehouses. While auditability is an important priority, DoD's focus on compliance with legal auditing requirements does not address the issues caused by the antiquated IT and travel systems. Until IT systems are modernized, which is why I fully support a hearing on the FTARA scorecard so that we can continue to press for updates and modernization investments, passing an audit will not just be difficult, but impossible. And if we pan back, we also see DoD has a history of resistance against basic oversight despite being given a litany of exemptions from fundamental management requirements and possessing the largest single budget in human history. For example, we appreciate Mr. John Sherman coming to our subcommittee last year to testify on Federal Information Technology Acquisition Reform Act, FTARA, a law I helped co-author, to improve agencies' management of IT resources and drive best practices. However, it's concerning that DoD is exempted from certain provisions within that law and is still only achieving a C on the scorecard. As a reminder, these grades are not scarlet letters, but they do emphasize the need for agencies to take IT modernization seriously. And today's subject at today's hearing is illustrative of that. Furthermore, DoD must meet its mission to protect national security without sacrificing common sense good governance practices. DoD must justify the exemptions they want to retain through demonstrated responsible outcomes. Can't have it both ways. DoD spends billions and billions of taxpayer dollars every year, for which they need to account. This fundamental activity, the basics of clean bookkeeping, will not occur unless DoD can first meet integral good governance management standards that lay the building blocks for serving this nation effectively. Among those fundamentals is replacing ineffective legacy IT systems with up-to-date, contemporary, nimble systems that concurrently reduce fraud and enhance customer service. Congress must get this nearly decade-long effort to modernize DoD's travel system back on track to address the agency's hundreds of millions of dollars of improper payments every year, or continue to risk not only travel convenience, but military readiness. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Connolly. I'm pleased today to introduce our witnesses for today's hearing. Also, my teenage kids just walked in, so I wanted to say hi and recognize I'm waving at the teenagers in the audience, not at our witnesses. So pardon me, but this is their first time seeing a hearing and seeing their mom chair a hearing, so kind of stoked. Mom is stoked about them being here, although they're embarrassed. So our first witness today is Mr. Jeffrey Register, Director of the Defense Human Resources Activity, reporting to the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness. Our second witness is Ms. Elizabeth Field, Director of Defense Capabilities and Management at the U.S. Government Accountability Office, or GAO. Welcome, everyone. Welcome you too. We're pleased to have you this afternoon. Pursuant to Committee Rule 9G, the witnesses, if you'll please stand and raise your right hands. All right, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Let the record show that the witnesses all answered in the affirmative. And Miles and Ellie, this is where it gets real. Okay, so today we appreciate all of you being here today and look forward to your testimony. Let me remind the witnesses that we have read your written statements and they will appear in the full in the hearing record. Please limit your oral statements to 5 minutes. As a reminder, please press the button on the microphone in front of you so that it's on and the members can hear you. When you begin to speak, the light in front of you will turn green. After 4 minutes, the light will turn yellow. When the red light comes on, your 5 minutes has expired, and we would ask that you please wrap it up. So today, at first, I want to recognize Mr. Register for your opening statement for 5 minutes.
Chairwoman Mace, Ranking Member Conley, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you for this oversight hearing on the Department's decision to not exercise the next contract option period for my travel. Our path to improve DoD's travel systems has been long, but despite the challenges, the Department remains committed to travel modernization in support of our workforce. The Department decided not to exercise the next contract option, recognizing it was the fiscally responsible way forward when faced with the challenges that I will outline today. Rest assured, the Defense Travel System, DTS, is fully capable of meeting DoD's travel mission. The department faced significant challenges in the continued implementation of MyTravel, which ultimately led to the decision not to exercise the next option period. That decision was made for two reasons: unexpectedly low use of MyTravel and the department's prioritization of passing a clean audit over enterprise resource planning, or ERP, financial management systems integration. In 2019, the services originally committed to integrate their ERP systems between September 2021 and 2023. However, there were continued delays due to the shift in other service ERP systems priorities, primarily supporting audit remediation, which led to extending the timeline to accommodate those delays. Unlike DTS, MyTravel was intended to be a travel system that leveraged the financial management capabilities of the ERPs, which meant the services needed to add more features to their ERPs before shifting to MyTravel. DTS allows department components to be fully audit compliant without needing the services to further invest in their ERPs. We eventually reached a point where we could not accommodate any more delays, and given that we still lack firm commitments from the services on the timeline for ERP integration, we could not continue with the contract due to the cost of the department. Despite the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness's mandatory use directive for onboarded defense agencies, a robust training program, onboarding support, and executive-level engagement, usage of the system lagged behind estimated and contracted transaction volumes. The low adoption rate for onboarded organizations, coupled with a slower than anticipated return to travel after COVID-19 restrictions were lifted, resulted in less than 12% system usage as of the end of April 2023. While our decision may appear abrupt, the department has been discussing the challenges and potential courses of action for MyTravel for some time prior to the announcement. Although the program made significant advances, continued implementation of MyTravel is no longer in the best interest of the department. The most fiscally sound way forward was to not exercise the next contract option period. This was determined after consulting with the offices of the Undersecretaries for Personnel and Readiness, Comptroller, and Acquisition and Sustainment. Without the commitments from the military departments and the travel transaction volumes they were expected to provide, it was not prudent or fiscally responsible to proceed with a $44 million contract option for a system being poorly utilized. Going forward, my organization will lead a collaborative analysis to review lessons learned from MyTravel and other factors to determine the best approach going forward. That will include functional, technical, and acquisition strategies to best meet the department's needs while exercising sound financial stewardship. MyTravel was intended to be a cost savings for the department, but that has not been the case. Until our analysis is complete, DoD will continue to utilize DTS, which is already used for the majority of the department's temporary duty travel and has been significantly improved to include many of the cost-saving features originally envisioned for MyTravel. As I previously said, DTS fully supports audit readiness requirements. It is also compliant with all DoD cybersecurity requirements, and its customer satisfaction ratings are greater than 80%. In closing, Madam Chairwoman, I thank you, the ranking member, and the members of the subcommittee for your outstanding and continuing support of the men and women who proudly wear the uniform in defense of our great nation. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. I now recognize Ms. Field to begin her opening statement. Thank you.
Chairwoman Mace, Ranking Member Connolly, and members and staff of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in today's hearing on DoD's decision to discontinue its move to the new MyTravel system. I want to be clear from the outset that GAO, the nonpartisan, fact-based investigative arm of Congress, has not had the opportunity to conduct an audit on the MyTravel system or the circumstances surrounding its termination. In fact, it's probably fair to say that today we have more questions than we do answers. That said, I would like to offer my observations on three things that we do know. First, we know that DoD has long held concerns about the department's legacy travel system, known as DTS. As DoD stated in 2021, DTS suffered from poor usability, low customer satisfaction, and improper payments of travel entitlements. Some of these problems were evident early on. In a series of audit reports that GAO issued between 2005 and 2009, we identified significant system deficiencies with DTS, such as inaccurate displays of flight and airfare information, and weaknesses in controls designed to detect and deter travel that did not comply with DoD regulations. GAO made 14 recommendations to DoD to address these problems, most of which DoD implemented. More recently, in 2019, we found that DoD needed to do more to avoid improper payments in its travel pay program. As you know, improper payments include those made in the wrong amount or that should not have been made. While many of the problems we identified with improper payments related to user error, some had to do with the system itself. For example, at the time of our audit, a tool that DoD had developed within DTS to automatically review vouchers and look for possible improper payments did not flag all types of voucher errors, such as those that had been submitted without required receipts. We made 5 recommendations in our 2019 report, and to DoD's credit, it moved quickly to implement them. Nonetheless, DoD officials continued to have concerns about DTS. As recently as late 2022, DoD officials instructed organizations throughout the defense enterprise to phase out DTS and move to the new MyTravel system, citing it as an industry-leading product. The second thing we know is that cross-cutting agency reform is hard, especially at an agency as large and complex as the Department of Defense. DoD's multi-year, multi-million-dollar effort to replace DTS is just one example of unsuccessful attempts department officials have made to roll out new enterprise-wide systems or to fundamentally change how the department does business. In 2005, GAO added DoD's approach to business transformation to its high-risk list because the department had not taken the necessary steps to achieve and sustain business reform on a broad, strategic, department-wide, and integrated basis. Creating a new enterprise-wide IT system for DoD is a particularly challenging endeavor, given the many weaknesses in the department's operating environment. DoD has hundreds of IT and financial management systems, some of them created as far back as the 1960s, and many of them not designed to be auditable. As GAO reported in 2000, DoD does not have a clear picture of its systems environment, nor does it have a well-defined roadmap with performance measures, targets, and timeframes for modernizing its countless IT systems. GAO has also reported that DoD does not have adequate guidance to ensure that any new IT systems only move into development if the department can document that they meet certain requirements, such as any unique interface requirements. Without making a judgment as to whether DoD should have adopted the new MyTravel system, I would suggest that this experience may offer some insight into business transformation more broadly at the department, which brings me to my third and final point. Through decades of careful research and audit work, GAO has identified traits of successful and unsuccessful reform efforts, and based on that work, developed a set of key questions that can be used to assess reform efforts. Questions such as, to what extent has the agency established clear outcome-oriented goals and performance measures for the proposed reforms? And, is there a dedicated implementation team that has the capacity, including staffing and resources, to manage the reform process? These questions may sound simple, and to a certain extent they are, but so often we find that unsuccessful reform efforts miss the mark in at least one of these areas. I offer them as a resource for both Congress and DoD in examining the MyTravel case. Perhaps some of the answers will become evident through today's hearing. Thank you again for this opportunity, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Field, and I would now like to recognize myself for 5 minutes of questioning. As I said in my opening remarks, many of us are frustrated by the lack of accountability, the lack of transparency concerning what happened here. It's a bipartisan frustration, and in fact, I think this failure to adopt a new travel system stems from a lack of management accountability within DoD. And compared to the civilian world, we envision our military as a clear hierarchy in which orders are handed down and then carried out. But the lines of authority seem blurred when it comes to DoD business operations. I think it's very obvious here. The primary reason Undersecretary Cisneros pulled the plug on adoption of the new travel system in May was that too few DoD components were prepared to use it because they hadn't finished the necessary financial management system integration work. Is that correct, Mr. Register, yes or no?
That's correct.
Okay. I want to know how that happened. So they knew this program was coming and yet seemingly didn't do anything to prepare. Under what authority did Undersecretary Cisneros issue his October memo instructing DoD components to adopt MyTravel?
I can't speak to the authorities of the Undersecretary. I'll have to take that one for the record.
Right. Which is why we actually asked him to be here, and now you're here, and now you're telling me it's above your pay grade. So, like, why are you here if you can't? I mean, this is literally the first question. You can't answer it.
I'm here to represent the department when it comes to the decisions related to the contract and the decision not to.
Was the undersecretary delegated to that authority by the SecDef?
I'll have to take that for the record, Madam Chairwoman.
That's the second question that you can't answer today. So why do you think component heads didn't prioritize the adoption of the new system? Why did that happen?
Madam Chairwoman, the audit remediation requirements in pursuit of the overall audit readiness impacted the service's ability to integrate into the MyTravel platform.
Okay, tell me in English, what does that mean? Nobody understands what you just said.
Madam Chairwoman, so
I don't think this is funny. Like, I really don't. Now you're laughing at me. I mean, you're coming up here and you can't even answer the two of the first three questions, and you're now giving me some BS answer. I don't understand it. How much money was wasted on this?
Madam Chairwoman, I don't view the investment that was made in MyTravel as being a waste of money. As the department's been trying to innovate in this travel space, we are taking...
Who decided that the best course of action in May was to cancel the contract?
That was a coordinated decision within the department.
Who decided that?
The Undersecretary of Personnel and Readiness in coordination with the Comptroller and Acquisition and Sustainment.
Do you know how they came to that decision?
It was based on the information that the program put forward and where we stood in terms of courses of action, in terms of where to take MyTravel going forward within this fiscal year.
So DoD justified that a sole source contract for a new system just a few years ago by arguing that it was wasting a lot of money. They actually said that under the existing system. In fact, there's a document that we have here. This is a document that is a justification for the sole source contract. It's pretty redacted when you start it, and I don't really know why it's redacted. In fact, on the page 4, the second paragraph, the first line, the DoD has incurred blank in cost to modernize travel. Like, they couldn't even tell us how much was spent to modernize travel either. Ms. Field, I have about a minute left, so I'm going to give since my first witness can't answer really any relevant questions or answer them very well, my last few questions are for you. It seems like this project was moving along well for a few years before it went off the rails. Was there a change at some point in how the travel system replacement project was managed within DoD that contributed to the failure?
There was a change. Specifically, the reform effort to create the MyTravel program had been run out of a cross-functional team that was overseen by the first Deputy Chief Management Officer and then the Chief Management Officer and the Reform Management Group. When those units were disbanded, when the Chief Management Officer position went away, there was a clear disruption in leadership for this effort. The extent to which that is one of the factors behind the demise of MyTravel, I don't know, but it certainly would bear to research.
Is there anyone in charge of managing business functions across the DoD?
Well, certainly the Chief Information Officer has a key role to play in managing business systems, but as of right now, there are 3 chairs that sort of co-chair the Defense Business Council. Okay,
thank you, and I yield back. Mr. Connolly.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. In October of 2022, the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel Readiness, Gilbert Cisneros, who's not here, issued a memorandum mandating the use of MyTravel as, quote, the single official travel system, unquote, and instructing all DoD organizations that are not currently integrated with MyTravel to, quote, develop an interface with that system. 7 months later, that instruction was rescinded. Mr. Register, why?
Ranking Member, that memo was rescinded because we were not getting the travel volume that we were attempting to get under the current contract. So the decision was then made that based on the low volume, low usage to date, and the low forecasted usage, given that we did not have a timeline for the services to integrate, that's what led to the business decision to not exercise the $44 million contract option.
So travel had declined in DoD?
Ranking Member, no, not travel at writ large. It was limited use of the My Travel capability.
But he had instructed that they were to use My Travel.
That was the mandate for the Fourth Estate, the defense agencies and activities, was to utilize My Travel. That's correct.
So you're saying people disregarded that instruction. And because of that, the Pentagon decided, rather than enforce the memo from the man charged with responsibility, they would rescind his instruction. That's how we're going to deal with saluting and obeying orders in the Pentagon, at least when it comes to travel.
Ranking Member, I don't necessarily agree with that statement. The My Travel capability was not fully ready for all forms of travel. We were trying to build as much travel volume as possible since it was a subscription contract, a number of trips on the contract. But as we found out, at least through this last fiscal year, the agencies and activities preferred to travel within DTS, both from a usability standpoint and because DTS better supported audit readiness requirements.
Somebody gave a sole source contract from My Travel, right?
That's correct.
Presumably, when you do that, award the contract, you've made a qualitative decision that that's the capability we need, and you've made a decision we have to replace the capability we currently have for various inadequacies and weaknesses. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So I understand maybe a memo that's, or not a rescission, but we're going to delay a little bit the implementation because of travel volume and for everyone to get with the program. But to rescind it is essentially to put up the white flag and say we're not going to proceed anymore and keep on doing what you're doing in the old system. Would that be a fair interpretation of what happened?
Ranking Member, not exactly, since the approach that the department has taken with My Travel from the outset has been an innovative, agile, cost savings approach from the get-go. So as that production contract was let, there was still development that was required. It was an agile development process. Given that the services could not get the ERPs integrated in time, got us to this juncture this fiscal year where it made no business sense to continue and wait for that and exercise that next contract option. It was just fiscally irresponsible.
Ms. Field, is that the analysis of GAO? That what happened?
Well, again, we haven't done an audit, and I have limited information, but I would offer just a few thoughts. The first is that when you think about the bulk of travel that happens at the department, it's by the services. They're the biggest components. And so if the services don't agree to make adjustments to their systems to connect to My Travel, of course you don't have the volume of travel that you need to make the investment worthwhile.
Let me interrupt you there. The Undersecretary of Defense, civilian control, said, this is the system, you will use it. What do you mean services get to, what's that, odd referendum?
So we have seen on more than one occasion, and this is just the latest, incidents in which the department at the OSD level wants to reform a business operation enterprise-wide, and the services do not agree, and the reform efforts fail.
Madam Chair, my time is up, but I certainly am prepared to join with you in insisting Mr. Cisneros come back for a subsequent hearing to account for this story.
Or else.
Well,
Thank you, Mr.
we're nicer
Connolly.
than that, but
I am not. I'm not today. Mr. Timmons,
no peaches for him.
no peaches for him, but maybe
thank you.
Mr. Timmons can be a little bit nicer than us today. But thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to try to be productive with my 5 minutes. So I am one of 6 members of Congress that also serves in the Guard of the Reserves out of 535. I actually have drill in August. I am currently CAC'd in, and I'm on the DTS website. I have personally had really, really bad experience with DTS. I have multiple times had to use my own resources to get to trainings because flights were canceled. And I've been texting with a number of people that I serve with in the South Carolina National Guard, and it's interesting because while I hate DTS, they actually think it's okay. The platform is okay. The issue is the manner in which the approvals are necessary to actually authorize the travel. So I book my flight and I get an authorization and it doesn't get approved because probably 3, 4, 5 people actually have to sign off on it. And that's a challenge because, one, I'm in the Guard and not everybody's active. So I guess my first question, do you have any data about the disparity between the approval ratings for DTS between active versus the Guard and Reserve components? Mr. Register, would you have any thoughts? Even anecdotal?
I don't have any anecdotal references between the two. I can certainly understand knowing how
If you
the
don't use it on a regular basis,
Exactly.
if you use it every 6 months, and that can become a problem, and you don't know who to hound to make sure that they grant your approval. Now, I will say this, and I think it might give some of my colleagues some color to the challenge. My travel apparently was just horrific. I mean, it just didn't work, and it was not functional. I guess the idea was to try to streamline all of these issues and provide some new technology to address this challenge, but it just didn't work. And I would imagine that it seemed like a really good idea, and once they started implementing it, everybody said, this just doesn't work. And so I do believe that our former colleague, Ms. Cisneros, should come and chat with us about this, but I have a feeling that's what he's going to say. He's going to say, it seemed like a good idea at the time, and we tried to fix it, and we realized that the solution that we thought was the solution was actually way worse than the previous one. So I guess, you know, I use Uber Eats a lot, and when he arrives at my door, I get a message saying, the food has arrived, come get it. I mean, theoretically, the biggest challenge with DTS is the lack of real-time communication between the individual, the service member, and the approval authorities. I'm assuming it's at least 1, 2, 3, or 4, depending on the individual's rank. Is there a way that you could add some sort of a notification component to DTS to streamline that process? Because it seems the biggest challenge is, one, people don't know how to use it. That's me. I don't know how to use it. I rely on other people for that. But two, it's the approval process. Is there a way to address that?
There are some system abilities to address that. In some regard, our hands are tied, so to speak, based on the requirements, the federal requirements of travel approval. So there needs to be that accountability built into the system for audit purposes and that sort of thing. But I think DTS, quite honestly, has improved in the past 3 to 5 years to help streamline that to some degree.
And I'll say this, I was commissioned on June 10th of 2018, and so I've been in 5 years now, and not until about, 24 months ago, I couldn't even get on my email or access any of the government, any of the Air Force portals unless I was on base using a particular computer. And even on base, it was hard. So we've made huge strides. The fact that I'm able to use a MacBook Pro has made my life drastically easier. And you know, I think one thing that we need to think about when we're looking at this, there's a dollar component of it. The biggest problems are going to be giving a service member money that they are not owed, because when you figure that out later, they do not have that money, or oftentimes they do not have that. So when you look at it from that perspective, but I guess the other thing, and I think the bigger problem is, we need to address, I hate to even use this, it's a mental health issue for our service members when you're sitting here trying to manage something that is not within your control that really should be easier. It really drives you up the wall. And I have had more frustrations trying to manage DTS than I care to talk about, but I do think that the Pentagon is trying to move it in the right direction, trying to improve, and I guess we can try to help them in that endeavor. Thank you for being here, and with that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Timmons. I would now recognize Mr. Mfume for his 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I want to thank you for holding this hearing and share with you my expression of frustration also. I, for the life of me, just cannot understand why persons who are duly appointed refuse to show up at congressional hearings to discuss very important facts and details about the operation they're overseeing. I mean, that just makes no sense whatsoever. And there really is no explanation for it. I mean, this is how we get to subpoenas. You know, you invite, they don't show up. You invite again, they don't show up. And then all of a sudden, there is an effort within the committee to subpoena someone. It's not because we want to do it. It's just the only way we can talk to people. And Mr. Register, I'm not here to blame you because you're just carrying out the duty of the person who is above you. But it is frustrating, I can tell you that. And I don't even know that I have any questions because my questions won't be able to get answered. The chair has just proven that. And so my frustration is sort of overflowing here. I do have one question, though, for you, Ms. Field. Are you aware of Asif Khan at GAO?
Mr. Asif Khan from our Financial Management and Assurance team, yes.
Yeah, he was kind enough to come here a couple of weeks ago. We did a joint hearing. And Mr. Asif Khan is the Director of Financial Management and Assurance at GAO. This was a joint hearing that we held on the DOD, and Mr. Khan highlighted the fact that there are over 400 systems in DOD. And when asked by the gentlewoman from South Carolina how many of those systems work, he said none of them, which just shocked me and I think both sides of this committee hearing room. None of them, 400. And then he went on to say that since 1995, DOD has been on a risk list. In other words, every year, they pose a substantial risk in terms of their auditing and their financial management, and they get cited for it. But they were here asking that we sign off again on the appropriations bill so that they might be able to continue their work. 400 financial systems. They don't communicate with each other. He said they don't have any controls. And so the information does not pass from one system to another, including the system that we're talking about here today, and that is this whole matter of travel and everything that might be related to it. I'm just flabbergasted. And Madam Chair, I would support whatever effort you and the ranking member should come up with to make sure that this doesn't happen. This is an affront to a democratic process. And I'm sure it's an affront to men and women all over the country who are watching this and are saying to themselves also, I can't believe what you say because I see what you do. And then since you don't do anything, like show up at a duly called meeting, what you say, Mr. Cisneros, does not matter at all. Let me go one step further, and while I'm at it, I want to reiterate what the ranking member said regarding the problem that we're having from the other body, which is how we refer to the Senate. And with the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Tuberville, who has continued to hold up hundreds of DOD appointments, putting our nation at risk in a number of different ways and creating a situation through this boycott to confirm people that is, in my estimation, just as damaging. And I want to mention that even though that is not the subject of this hearing, because it's doing equal damage, I am sure. So I thank you both for doing your duty, for showing up, but I hope, Mr. Register, you take the word back, if it's not being taken back already, that there is near unanimity in this committee for a better approach to our invitations to join and to give information to the American public. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Mfume, not only affront but offensive, and thank you for your comments. We agree with you. I would like now like to recognize Mr. Khanna for his 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your leadership. I just want to echo my colleagues' comments that it is unacceptable for the Honorable Gilbert Cisneros not to be here. Especially someone who served in Congress should understand that they need to be here. And look, I worked at the Commerce Department. You know, the undersecretary can show up. It's not the secretary. I was a deputy assistant secretary. The undersecretary has enough time to come to a congressional hearing. It's not like we're asking Secretary Austin to come. And this issue is a concern. I mean, I've been outspoken about some of the fraud and abuse and waste in the Department of Defense, and this is one of the areas where there needs to be accountability. And to not be here answering questions really is not a good look. And so I would urge you to take this back to the Undersecretary, and I believe there's going to be bipartisan cooperation to have him come here whenever this will be convened again. I did have this is one of the challenges with all of this, is exposes the technology gap in the Department of Defense. I mean, the idea that the Department of Defense still excludes many of its IT systems from FITARA is a real issue, and I'd like to get your thoughts on that. I'd also like to get your thoughts with Chair Mace. Last week, we introduced the Search Act, H.R. 4793, that would require agencies to use modern technology like AI, large language models, to improve government search functions, to make information more easily accessible to the American public. Would implementing LLMs and modern AI technology help improve DoD websites, as this bill would specifically require the usage and implementation of AI and LLMs? Would it help improve potentially the travel system and my travel? Ms. Field?
I think the issues with DoD's business systems are so vast, frankly, that what we need first, as the department considers AI or any other technologies, are two things. One is a clear business enterprise roadmap so that the department officials know what systems they're going to modernize, which legacy systems they're going to get rid of, how they're going to do it, when they're going to do it. And they need an updated federated business enterprise architecture, something that the department initially told us at GAO they would have by the end of last year. We don't have it, and we don't have a timeline for receiving it either.
I agree with that, but certainly you would agree that having modern AI technology in general for DoD functions would be a good thing?
I think modernizing across the board to include AI certainly is a function that could show promise for the department, yes.
Mr. Register?
I agree with that premise, and as it relates to my travel, I think we've proven that modern technology can be utilized, and a software as a service capability does have promise. We just need to prioritize our financial integration and really dig into whether certain commercial offerings, subscription offerings, for example, at a firm fixed price are in the best interest of the government.
Well, I appreciate both of your answers. I've enjoyed working with Chair Mace in the past on trying to modernize our government. Last Congress, we did things with preparing the government for quantum. I'm honored to be working with her on the Search Act of AI. But I also just want to echo that I support her efforts to hold accountability of the DoD travel system, and we'll be working with her to make sure that we have the appropriate folks here to answer the questions. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Khanna. And in closing, I want to thank our panelists again for their testimony today. I want to thank Mr. Khanna, too, for your leadership as well. We work together a lot. You don't see that a lot up here, but I appreciate your bipartisanship on this committee as always. And in closing, I need to say something to you, Mr. Register, about this hearing today. On June 30th, I wrote to Undersecretary Cisneros requesting documents that are relevant to this hearing. Specifically, I requested the unredacted version of this document of the Defense Travel Modernization Justification documentation and approval of the sole source contract awarded to SAP to concur. And in case the department's confused, this is the document that I want in unredacted format that I just showed you, and I showed it earlier a couple times. I asked to have it by July 14th. Today is July 26th. We are 12 days past the deadline, and I still haven't received the document. I would like it by the end of the week. Will you commit today to getting me this document, unredacted, for the Oversight Committee by the end of the week?
Madam Chairwoman, the department's continuing to review your request.
How long does it take the DoD to review a document, a 5-page document, and whether or not they can deliver it unredacted? How long does that process take?
Madam Chairwoman, the department's continuing to review your request.
Your answers are such bullshit. Like, I'm really, like, take that back to Undersecretary Cisneros, that the next time we have this hearing, he better show up. I'm just sick and tired of the bullshit. Like, truly, you know, you couldn't deliver the document, and you're sitting here smirking at me like this is some, like, freaking joke to you. This isn't funny. You guys waste billions of dollars every single year. You're coming here mocking us. We have questions that you can't answer. You guys can't deliver a simple document. Your time's up. You don't get to speak, and this is my committee, so turn your microphone off. But you can't deliver the documents. You can't deliver the witness, and you can't deliver the answers. And you're just sitting there smirking with your smug look on your face, laughing at us. And you think that this is respectful of the institution of Congress, the institution of men and women who put on the uniform every single day and put their lives on the line. You come here and you act like this. It's an insult to the American people. So I would suggest that you get a little professionalism and respect for all of us up here, Republican and Democrat, and next time you show up with answers and show up with a witness that we asked for. So with that, and without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days within which to submit the materials, to submit any additional written questions for the witnesses. They can do that. They will be forwarded to the witnesses for their response. If there's no further business, and there's not, without objection, because this hearing is absolutely over, we stand adjourned. Thank you.